If you're interested in getting into property development in the UK, then permitted development rights are an incredible way to do that. So many people are scared away from the property development market in the UK because of the planning system. The planning system, it takes forever, it's so long, it's complicated, it's convoluted, it's you can't rely on it. But permitted development rights, in the 10 years that I've been in the planning industry, never has there been such an opportunity to use permitted development rights that really offer beginners and anyone that wants to invest in real estate in the UK. It's given them an amazing opportunity to get in, and it's really lowered the barriers to entry. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you the best strategies to be using permitted development rights right now. I'll be giving you 3, but I'll be saving the 4th till the very end, so make sure you stay around for that. And as I've said already, I've been in the planning industry for over 10 years, and permitted development rights are a huge part of it. You know, the really savvy people and investors use it to the best of their abilities, but right now there's never been a better opportunity to use permitted development rights because the scope of it and them have been so expanded in the last year or so. So this video will be walking you step by step through that. So let's start off with the first one. So just before I get into each of the different permitted development rights, I'll just quickly explain what permitted development rights are. Permitted development rights are a way of sidestepping the planning system. So you can get planning permission, and then you can get they're called permitted development rights, which in technicality in some instances don't require planning permission. It's a way of quickening up the planning process so that you can have assurance over the type of development that you want to do to your property, and it's got very clear timescales for it. So, you know, planning permission, you have to apply to the council, negotiate with the officer, you're open to scrutiny from the public through public consultation. Permitted development sidesteps all of that in most instances, and it's a really assured way of getting to the planning system. So if you're looking at a property, you can do your assessment using this video and realize that actually you could use permitted development rights and really make a lot of profit without ever having to get anywhere near the red tape and the scary nature of the planning system and its unpredictability. So that's what it is, and now let's get started with the first permitted development right that will help you the most. So permitted development rights are created by what's called the General Permitted Development Order, which is essentially a bit of legislation that kind of lists out all the different types of development that you can do without planning permission. The document is split into a bunch of, like I say, different developments, and they're called parts. So there are 20 parts, but there's only a few in there that are really of any interest, and I'll start running through them. So the first one is part 1, and this is the one that will kind of capture most of what most people want to do with a property, and that is defined as development within the curtilage of a dwelling house, which basically means within the land of your house you can do these things. So you can do rear extensions up to 3, 4, 6 or 8 meters, depending on whether you're, you know, a terrace, semi-detached or detached property. You can do side extensions, but you can't go wider than 50% of the original dwelling house. And the original dwelling house is as it was first built, not as not as its existing state. You have to check to make sure the original dwelling house was as it's first built. And then you can also now Class AA within Part 1 allows you to go up to 2 stories if your property is already 2 stories or more. If you're a bungalow, you can go up to 1 story. So this one does require something called prior approval, which is kind of a pared back version of planning system. You still get assurances, but there are just certain little tests that a local authority will want to make. And one of the other ones is Class B. Class B allows for rear dormers. So if you want to develop roof space, you can put a rear dormer in there, and you can put a new habitable room in there and really, increase the value of your property. So Class 1 is development within the curtilage of a dwelling house. Really, really great class. Allows you to do so many things, and really can add, if you add all those things together, so side extensions, rear extensions, roof extensions, and going up 2 stories, you can do all of those under permitted development rights individually. So you can add so much floor space under permitted development rights, and never have you had to talk to a planning officer or negotiate a very, very lengthy planning permission. So permitted development rights for a dwelling house are really, really massive. And if you're looking at your next property, have a look at whether or not you can do permitted development rights in your area. Check if there's an Article 4 direction. I've done a video on that before, and then you can really find out when you do a next house viewing or in your own house, you can really find out whether you can add massive value without going anywhere near the planning system. The next PD right, and we're still within part 1, which is within the curtilage of a dwelling house, but I've given it its own section because if you think about how COVID has changed the way everyone works now, they work at home, and quite often a lot of people want that separate space. Not every house was designed with a front study, so permitted development rights allow you to build an outbuilding in your back garden. It's called permitted development outbuildings or garden rooms, and you can buy these things prefabricated, but the point is that you can build a kind of outbuilding up to a single story, but it can't be more than 50% of the curtilage of the dwelling house, and it has to be set in from certain boundaries. And this adds massive value. The key to this though is, and I've been in a number of appeals where this has arisen, you can't build the outbuilding and then say, oh, wouldn't this be great as a self-contained flat? That's the creation of a new residential unit, and if you do that without planning permission, you're subject to enforcement action. So that's where planning comes in. But if you just want to add floor space to your house, if you want to use it as a gym, if you want to use it as a study, if you want to use it as a swimming pool, if you want to use it as a anything else you can think of, then you can do it under permitted development rights. Like I say, it has to be single story, can't be more than 50% of the dwelling house, and it needs to be set in from certain boundaries so that you're not really the idea really is that you don't impact the kind of amenity of your neighbours. So outbuildings can be done under permitted development, and they're a really valuable class to use. One of the other critical parts of the general permitted development order, and one that you should really think about benefiting from, is part 20. This is the area of permitted development that's been added lately, and that's what I mean when I say that this is the best kind of time that under permitted development rights there have been, because you can add units, more residential units under PD. You don't need planning permission. I'll just run through them now what they are. So part 20 allows you to build new dwelling houses on certain buildings. You can build 2 stories on blocks of flats, on commercial buildings, on terraced buildings in commercial or mixed use, or terrace buildings in use as a dwelling house, or detached buildings in use as a dwelling house. So basically you can add two stories for new units on most buildings, whether in residential, whether it's detached, terraced or semi-detached, and you can also add them onto commercial buildings for residential purposes. So that is absolutely huge. There are certain tests within there, so within that part there are a couple of criteria in there that you need to meet. Some of them require prior approval, which again is a pareback planning system, a pareback planning process where basically just certain things are not considered under the planning process. Generally the big things are design and amenity. Design is whether or not it looks good, does it suit the building in terms of materials and that, because you've got the 2 stories established, so the rest of it is just whether or not it's a good design. And then amenity is whether adding those 2 stories is going to impact the kind of living conditions of your neighbours, or even of the future residents. Are the units that you're going to create, are they going to be suitable enough to have is it going to be suitable enough for residential? So massive part 20 is a huge thing. So I said that I'd be saving the best strategy until the last part of the video. So far we've dealt with everything on residential land. Now I mentioned previously in the last one that you can add 2 stories on a commercial building, but this next part is a real game changer in planning. A lot of councils are fearful of it because of what it might do to their high street and also their kind of office stock throughout their local authority area. So we're talking about Class MA permitted development rights. Now this is essentially a change of use from commercial to residential. Now a big part of this is what commercial now includes. Not to confuse you too much, but a couple of years ago things like office, retail and gym space were separate uses. You needed planning permission for those different things to convert them into residential. Now they've been changed into one use. So Class E includes all of those uses. So you can change Class E into residential. So that means if you find a property that's a gym, that's an office, that's a retail space, you have the opportunity to change the use of that into residential, that is really, really big. So, you know, residential units generally are most valuable in highly accessible areas. And if you think about the uses I just mentioned in Class E includes retail and gyms and offices, and almost all of those, bar the kind of out of the city kind of standalone office blocks, all those uses are generally, you know, they correlate with a town centre, and those are the kind of most accessible areas. So this Class E is really, 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 really massive. There are a few things that you need to do to make sure that you can do this, but the point is that this principle is established. The government, the state government, which is where the general permitted development order comes from, is saying you can do this now, but at a local area there may be certain restrictions. And again, it comes down to Article 4 directions, which again I've done a video on. Councils are getting a bit scared about this class, and they may implement an Article 4 direction which will prevent you from doing it. But just doing your research, and some of these videos will help you to do that, you can find out whether or not you can use this class to change the use, because changing a use is one of the most difficult things to do in planning, and you can now do it onto permitted development, which is absolutely massive, which could never have been done before, certainly not with this extent of commercial uses. So Class MA is permitted development rights. It's a great way to get into property development in the UK. If you're looking at commercial properties only, you now have the opportunity to look at whether or not changing it to residential would be more profitable. So that comes to the end of the video, and just to sum up, the 4 best strategies right now to get into property development in the UK using permitted development rights are permitted development extensions within the curtilage of a dwelling house, so rear extensions, roof extensions, side extensions. Then you've got outbuildings or garden room buildings, whatever you want to call them. Then you've got adding 2 stories onto certain buildings like terraced residential buildings, detached residential buildings and detached residential buildings, and also on top of some commercial buildings. And the last kind of bonus strategy that I mentioned was Class MA, and that's a change of use from commercial use to residential use, which could never have been done before without planning permission, certainly not to the extent it is today. So those are the 4 massive strategies you have at your disposal to get into property development in the UK using permitted development rights. So that wraps up the video. I hope you like it. Please leave a like if you did, and give me a comment if there's any strategies that you want me to do more of, or anything within this video that you want me to expand more on. So like I say, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification button so you know the next one's coming out, and I'll see you on the next video.